In May, something very significant happened. The number of jobs in the United States reached the same level it was in January 2008 when the recession began. The number of jobs stands at about 138.4 million. And now, this past May, there was an increase of 214,000 jobs that was created in that month. Now, the unemployment rate sits at about 6.3%, which means we are now, 6.5 years later, back up to the same number of jobs we were when the global crisis of capitalism began. What's significant here is the amount of time it took to get to this employment peak, 2,312 days. Every crisis of capitalism since 1945 has taken us longer and longer to recover from, meaning the amount of time it took for us to return to previous levels of employment. The 2001 recession took 4 years. From the 1980s recession, it took 2 years. From the 2008 financial crisis, it has taken 6.5 years. Now, an important thing to keep in mind here is that during that 6.5 years, the labor supply has expanded, meaning the number of working age adults who have entered the labor market has increased. And that new influx doesn't have any jobs, meaning the amount of jobs really necessary to recover the economy hasn't happened yet, which means we still have a whole bunch more jobs to create before we actually can get to a healthy level. This means that the recovery we've experienced thus far has been a jobless recovery. The percentage of people who are working age that do have jobs is at a low not seen since the 1970s, when women, didn't really work full-time yet. Labor force participation rate was 62.8%. The employment population ratio was 58.9%. People who lost their jobs between 2008 and 2010 have stayed out of work much longer than in previous recessions. The average weeks of unemployment remains stubbornly high. Americans who have lost their jobs are finding it much more difficult to get another one. If people do get work now, it's for significantly less than they had before, mostly in the service industry and the healthcare industry. Now, you'll also notice that there's been a massive rise in zero-hour contracts, meaning contracts where you're paid per hour, but there's not really a set amount, or people who work exclusively on call, or just paid, for every hour that they work while on call. This is very similar to the casual labor that was seen in the 19th century. Wage rates are growing, but only at about 2%, which doesn't keep up with taxes or inflation. And finally, the most important piece is that we are not getting new jobs. This has been a jobless recovery, yet we've seen corporate profits reach levels higher than it was before the recession. This does very well show the true face of capitalism. It is really only for those on top, and those of us on the bottom, those of us in the working and middle class, it don't really matter that much. For a very long time, these kinds of people have touted the middle class as being the real economic engine, and gave a lot of lofty words and pandered to them as if they were something special, and to convince them of their great virtue over, lower class people. In other words, a great tactic to divide the working and middle class. But I think we can see the real face now. This is a recovery for the capitalist class, not everyone else. Thank you for watching. Please comment and rate the video. If you liked it, hit subscribe or check out some of these other great videos. If you wish, share it on social media. While you're at it, why don't you follow me on Twitter? And if you got time, go on over to the MRN bookstore and check out some of the latest books available.